Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Every once in a while, there's always that film that maybe you saw brief clips of on television, or you're familiar with the concept, or you're familiar with kind of how the franchise is structured and things like that. And so it's one of those things for me for this movie review where I kind of wanted to give this film kind of its full day in court, its full viewing, its start to finish watch. Because I remember vaguely seeing this film years ago. I remember certain clips of it as I was watching it and things like that. But I wanted to finally give this film kind of its full view. It was on HBO Max. I figured, it's for free to stream right now. Might as well give it its kind of, like I said, its full day in court and kind of give it its final view and to see how I'll officially feel about it. So that is the film Final Destination. This is the original film from 2000. This is the film that kind of launched that franchise way, way back in the day. It's crazy to think that this film is already 21 years old now. I think I would have been 10 years old when this film came out. So clearly I wasn't the right target audience when this film first came out. But now being 31 and, wanted to be familiar with film as much as I can. I wanted to finally give this film, like I said, its full day in court and give you guys what I think of the film and things like that. So, in Final Destination, for those who don't know what it's about a group of like late high school, early college years kids slash young adults. They're going on this trip to Europe somewhere, and one of them is having these bad thoughts and visions and bad dreams about a potential bad crash and explosion that the plane might have if he does board the plane and go through with this trip and things like that. So through a series of events, he doesn't board the plane, and he manages to get some other people who are from that class with him to kind of get off the plane too and not go through with it and kind of stay home and stay alive and things like that. So luckily enough for him, he was correct. When the plane took off, it did not successfully get out of the country. It exploded while it was trying to take off and get the passengers over to Europe. And so throughout the film, since they managed to cheat death this time, the people who did manage to stay back and not get killed in the plane explosion are kind of slowly killed off one by this invisible force. There's a pattern that one of them slowly kind of connects over time that who might be next and things like that. And so throughout the course of the film, you have to figure out how exactly are these people who did survive this plane incident, how are they going to live now that they're back in the U.S. and back at home and things like that? How are they going to survive? How are they going to continue forward? How are they going to avoid getting killed from what seems to be some type of an invisible force killing each of them off one by one? But overall, guys, I thought Final Destination is a good film. It's not exactly a great film. There's always going to be films that are classics that you're never going to forget about, that are going to stay with you forever and things like that. I don't think Final Destination is one of those movies. I don't think it's in the ranks of, let's say, A Nightmare on Elm Street or Scream, or it's not along the lines of horror films or thrillers of things where the first film you think about when you hear about those genres, it's going to be this. I don't think Final Destination, at least for the most part for most people, doesn't fall in that category. But where I think it does succeed and where I think it does kind of stand the test of time and how it managed to get the sequels that it has is I think people really kind of connect with the concept of it. I think people always have, we as human beings always think of worst case scenario things happening to us, whether it's a trip or a car ride or something along that line. There's always that worst case scenario vision we have of what's the worst possible thing we could happen on a trip or while we're far away from home and things like that. And I think that's ultimately where Final Destination kind of standed the test of time, and how there's so many sequels and so many directors that are kind of coming in and giving their vision on this is because people they can connect with that concept. They can think of things where they don't want to be in the worst case scenario for something. And so as a result, it's a good horror film slash thriller because we all kind of think in that worst case scenario format, kind of creating very scary thoughts in our heads, thus creating a good horror slash thriller kind of movie. But overall, for my positives and negatives of Final Destination, where I think it succeeds and where I don't think it succeeds, on the parts where it does succeed, is like I said, it's first and foremost, I think this film has a chilling concept. I think a lot of people are kind of scared of the idea of worst case scenario on a plane, or worst case scenario on a car ride, worst case scenario on a roller coaster, which I think was like the third one or something like that. always that worst case scenario when you're on something and you don't have a lot of power to escape that thing that you're on or transportation that you're on. I think that's ultimately what Final Destination really succeeds with, is the fact that it does have a chilling concept to it. I think what's also successful with this film is how cheating death can kind of lead to a scary life. Now that you've cheated death once, you really can't cheat it again. And so all this film provides different scenarios of what could possibly happen, what kind of dangerous scenarios could people face now that they're back home or at home or around sharp objects and things like that. What are some possible things that they could run into that this invisible force kind of kills each of them off one by one, and what could make that a very scary scenario to be in. So I think the idea of, like I said, cheating death and living a scary life as a result, kind of trying to find ways to cheat death again, is an interesting concept for a movie like this. This is my dishwasher. Just checking. My other positive for this movie is the film's also good about giving you clues and small details as to what might happen next. It's good about hinting towards those sort of things. Whether it is somebody getting killed off one by one back in the U.S. now that the plane incident's now occurred. There's just small little details, like one visual detail I liked in this is when they're about to board the plane. The guy who has the vision of the plane having the explosion sees like a small crack in the number of like their flight number for where they need to leave and things like that. Like a small crack in the number. Small details like that I think are very clever in this movie, and what I think ultimately make Final Destination stand the test of time the way it has. Another positive I have with the movie is Tony Todd has a role in this movie, the guy from the Candyman films. His character, I think, is supposed to represent both death and the intrigue of how people avoid it and things like that. I think that's ultimately what his character is supposed to represent, because I think his character does appear in the later films as well, as far as I remember of the later films. But I liked his role in this. It's very small in this first film in particular. I think he has a bigger role in the later films, I want to say. But I like the idea of kind of a character representing kind of these worst case scenarios and kind of being intrigued by it while also being aware of just how dangerous it is and how he feels sorry for the kids, but at the same time, he's kind of that character that represents something that you don't want to be. You don't want to be the guy where he's literally death knocking on your door. You don't want to be around this guy, but he's an intriguing character to be around. So I like the idea of a character like that for a Final Destination film like this. For my negatives of the film, though, I do think the novelty of Final Destination just wears thin after a while, specifically on this first entry. Just the novelty of worst case scenario, they're always running into it, so whether they're at home and they're around sharp knives, or they're in their bathroom and there's things in the bathroom that could get them killed or make it look like they tried to commit suicide or something like that. The novelty does wear a little thin after a while. I won't give away this one kill, but there's a kill involving one of the guys that's kind of supposed to be like the dumb comic relief character of the film. And you'll know who I'm talking about. He's a character that's very popular with another film franchise who's in this. I thought the way that character got killed off was very cheap and lazy. Yeah, I understood the scene was about cheating death and things like that, but there's a certain novelty to Final Destination that it has to be clever enough for it to work, and it has to keep going throughout the runtime. And that's kind of where the film for me started to wear thin, where the kills and the suspense and all that other stuff, it just felt like people were getting killed off one by one for the weirdest, stupidest scenario they could think of for how they could get killed off. So I thought the overall novelty of the film did wear thin as the film progressed. Another negative with the film, too, and I feel like this is kind of common for films like this, is there's little to almost no character development at all, besides the lead character and a girl character that kind of has visions the way he does. Besides those two characters, almost everybody else is completely disposable in the movie. They get almost no development at all, which kind of drew me crazy, being the film critic that I am and things like that. It just felt like a cheap horror trope of make them as stupid and lazy and disposable as possible, so when they do get killed off, nobody will really care. And to me, that's a really lazy way to write a movie. I think it's extremely lazy in this film in particular. Just the character development was extremely weak in this movie. I also thought more explanation could have happened as far as what exactly this invisible killing force was. Yes, I understood they cheated death and it's inevitable that they'll get killed off one by one. But I thought there could have been more explanation to it. It just kind of felt random to be random. There really was no driving force behind this, whether that is the Tony Todd's character or not, whether they needed to explain that some more. I thought more explanation just needed to be had here as far as what exactly this invisible killing force was, what the motivation was behind it. If you cheat death, is this something that everybody faces? There's just a lot of explanation that I think this film needed to have in order for something like this to work here. I also thought this film could have done a better job being more of a standalone story than just a franchise starter. You can tell they kind of made this film in mind of, oh, well, we'll set it up just enough so now they'll have to see the second one, they'll have to see the third one, they'll have to see the fourth one, they'll have to see the fifth one. And for me personally, because this film is about disposing of these people who did cheat death, and because you have to kind of start with a clean slate every time, I feel like that's not, at least for me personally, that doesn't motivate me to want to see the sequels at all. So I thought this film could have worked better if it just worked as a standalone story first, and maybe hint towards a potential franchise starter, but don't directly hit me in the head during the end of the movie and be like, now you have to watch Final Destination 2. I thought that was a very lazy way to end the film. But overall, I'm going to give Final Destination an 8 out of 10. I think there's good things about it. Like I said, I think the concept of this film is ultimately why this film has stood the test of time, is people connect with this concept of worst case scenario whenever they go on a trip and things like that. But like I said, the novelty does wear very, very thin by the end of the movie. And I think that's ultimately why Final Destination won't be able to be the classic that it is compared to other major horror films and horror franchises. So I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good enough movie, but it's not quite the classic that you heard about. At least in my eyes, it isn't.